Welcome to the Black Hall. Here we will listen to a story that happened on the island of Java. Life-killing witchcraft. At that time, in the village of Ujunged, a shocking incident occurred. One day there was a quarrel between Rudy and Harjo, and it turned out that Rudy had moved the boundary of his rice field. Of course Harjo didn't accept it. "What is this? The stake should be over there near the banana tree," said Harjo. Rudy also insisted that from a long time ago that was where the boundary of the land was planted. Rudy said. There was a commotion that ended. Harjo was so emotional. He hit Rudy in the face until he fell asleep. Blood flowed from the corner of Rudy's mouth. Rudy got up and walked away. But as he walked, Rudy said that blood must be paid for with blood. "Remember, it's Harjo," said Rudy as he walked away. In short, it was Saturday night around 9 o'clock. Harjo was drinking coffee and smoking on the terrace of his house. But Harjo felt that the night was unusually quiet. He was enjoying his coffee. Harjo felt as if someone was watching him, and Harjo faintly heard a voice in his ear. "Wow, who is that?" said Harjo, because at a glance he heard something that seemed to be running towards the back from the left side of his house. Because he was curious and he was worried that it was a thief, Harjo got up and rushed towards the sound, but there was nothing there. Harjo was surprised because someone had clearly run towards the back. Even when he turned around the house, Harjo didn't find anyone. And finally Harjo returned to the front. Because he felt strange and a bit scared too. Harjo was about to go into the house and suddenly Harjo's body shuddered, and when he looked back Harjo saw a ball of fire flying very fast towards Harjo. Harjo was scared and immediately turned around and wanted to run into the house. However, Harjo's body couldn't move, as if someone was holding his body, and in the end the fireball hit Harjo's body hard. Harjo mentally fell and hit the wall of the house. Blood came out of his mouth and nose. Harjo screamed and moaned in pain. "Oh, oh, oh, please, help," Harjo groaned. Harjo's wife, Susie, was shocked because she heard a noise from in front of her house. She came out, and when she got outside, Susie was shocked because she saw her husband lying on the floor covered in blood and moaning in pain. "Please help," Susie shouted. And coincidentally Mang Hadi, who was passing by, immediately came because he heard Susie's screams. "What's going on? What's going on?" said Mang Hadi. Because he was surprised to see Harjo, who was moaning in pain and covered in blood. Harjo was brought in by Mang Hadi, helped by Susie. Harjo was put to sleep on the bed. Mang Hadi asked, "Why is Harjo here?" Susie didn't know. She just shook her head and cried. That night Harjo was the only one who was in pain. "I could moan and couldn't even answer when asked." Mang Hadi, who was confused when he saw this, finally took the initiative to go to Susie's parents' house and report the incident to Susie's father, Kisaptani, who was an elder, who was a spiritual expert, who was an elder in the village of Ujunged. Long story short, Kisaptani came with Mang Hadi. Kisaptani immediately rushed over to Susie, who was still crying for her husband. Without asking too many questions, Kisaptani immediately approached and held Harjo's chest, which felt very hot, in his hand. "Susie, get some water quickly," Kisaptani ordered. Susie rushed to get the kitchen water and handed the water to her father. The water was immediately recited, a kind of prayer by Kisaptani, which strangely, the water in the glass gave off smoke like water that was being boiled, and drank the water to Harjo. After that Harjo also he seemed to be starting to calm down and fall asleep. "Susie cleaned the blood," said Kisaptani. Susie's father left the room and approached Mang Hadi, who was still sitting in the living room. A few moments later Susie came bringing drinks for her father and Mang Hadi. "Sus, what happened to your husband?" asked Kisaptani. Susie just shook her head because she didn't know what happened to her husband. "The problem is, your husband is cheating," said Kisaptani. Mang Hadi and Susie were surprised because they know that Harjo is a good person and has no enemies. "From whom, sir?" asked Susie. Suddenly there was a sound like an explosion. Door shocked the three of them, and a moment later they heard screaming from inside the room. They immediately rushed to the room. Susie screamed because she saw her husband vomiting again, and what came out was thick black blood that smelled very much like the smell of a carcass. Kisaptani immediately handled Harjo. While reading prayers, Kisaptani massaged Harjo's stomach, which seemed to be pulling towards Harjo's mouth, and Harjo vomited again. When he vomited, Kisaptani immediately moved to massage Harjo's back body from bottom to top. "Good, keep throwing it up. Let it all out until finally a clump of hair mixed with black mucus that smelled very bad came out. That's good. Fortunately, you can still be saved, said Ki Saptani, who again gave me water. Drink this, tell me what's really going on. After drinking, Harjo felt a little better and Harjo told Ki Saptani about what happened that morning. Ki Saptani said rudely, "Who understood this incident?" Ki Saptani was angry. "How dare Rudy's child yesterday afternoon disturb my family?" After treating Harjo, Ki Saptani went to the front and he picked 3 thorns from the salak tree in front of Harjo's house, and immediately sat down cross-legged. Then, Ki Saptani's mouth seemed to be constantly reciting a prayer or mantra. Because Mang Hadi was there too. Not knowing what Ki Saptani was reading, then he put 3 thorns of a snake fruit tree on his hand. Then Ki Saptani blew on the 3 thorns and the 3 thorns disappeared into a flash of light and disappeared. Ki Saptani got up and walked in, followed by Mang Hadi, who was still astonished. Meanwhile, at home, Rudy was in an uproar. Rudy screamed for mercy. It hurt, repented, it was hot all night long. Rudy groaned, screamed in pain. The neighbors heard it, but no one dared to come closer. Because they knew Rudy's angry and cruel nature, so the residents didn't want to intervene. After the morning, the residents were curious about what happened to Rudy, but the residents did not dare to come closer. Long story short, it's been 4 days since Rudy was never seen. After that night he shouted for help. The residents were curious and finally had the courage to come closer to make sure. 3 residents approached. Assalamu alaikum assalamu alaikum . After knocking several times there was no answer. Finally Rudy's front door was smashed open. After the door opened, the residents were shocked to see Rudy, who was curled up stiffly, and strangely his body was hard and dry like wood, and there were many traces of dried blood around the room. Back to the eyes, and residents found 3 salak tree thorns stuck in the wooden wall.